Hi everyone, it's William. It's the 1921 Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series, and we're still in Copenhagen staying at the English Mission. So it's the 9th of February, and this particular series of daily diary entries will be going through the 15th. And I took a look ahead yesterday and found that there will be a lot of social activity going on, and interestingly, in these few days to come, mostly socializing with the Russian colony, or the Russian community in Copenhagen. So that will be interesting. There were quite a few of them. So let's dive right into this one. The 9th of February was actually the 27th February in Copenhagen on the new calendar. It's 1921. It's a Wednesday, so right in the middle of the week. And yeah, here we go. I wrote in the morning and lunched at home. For my office, Lucia gave me a cozy sitting room with windows overlooking Bredgade and the square. So every day the guard passes by my windows with music on the way to the palace. The huge crowd of people that rush ahead of the musicians is striking. It was explained to me that they are in large part unemployed people. At 2 o'clock I went to the palace, or rather one of the 4 palaces in which Gustav lives. He suggested we take a drive to look at the palaces outside of Copenhagen. He took me in an open car, and despite the fact that he gave me his fur coat, it was terribly cold, as a result of which the next day I felt like the last dog. We went to Fredensborg. I found it very interesting because naturally I had heard a great deal about the place because it was where the whole family gathered back in Uncle Sasha's day. The house is surprisingly ugly. It looks like a barracks. Only the middle part is interesting with its period setting. I was struck by the absolute absence of footmen or anyone else to look after the place. The whole huge building is under the supervision of some unimpressive-looking gardener. Gustav and I walked through endless corridors and rather gloomy halls. I got home around 6 o'clock and was terribly cold. I had tea and dinner at home and went to bed very early. Okay, so muddle-headed Gustav actually turns out to be a nice guy. Dmitri doesn't say anything about any interesting conversation or how it went, but it was nice of him to arrange this tour. So Lucia Marling has given Dmitri an office for his stay at the English Mission. And what would he be doing in his office? He calls it an office, but I think mostly what he would be doing at that time was to be writing his diaries that he was taking so seriously at that point in his life, and probably also, well, maybe we'll see, receiving some of the Russian emigres, his fellow Russian political emigres, would maybe come and see him, and that would give him a place to do that, a private place, not in the sort of family rooms or public rooms of the English Mission. So I had to look Bredgade up. I can only use German pronunciations. I don't know Danish pronunciations at all, and it seems to me that they're not strictly phonetic. So anyway, I looked it up, and it's kind of the main boulevard in Copenhagen, I gather. Beautiful street. I had a look at it, photographs online, and then it was also on the street. You had the Amalienborg Palace, the main palace of the Danish royal family, and so apparently the guard Dmitri was telling us about the guard in the previous diary entry, and apparently they make this sort of ceremonial procession every day to the palace, maybe from nearby barracks, I guess, to replace the previous day's guard. And there are musicians, regimental or battalion musicians, and there's this very odd phenomenon of this this huge crowd of people that rush ahead. Those are Dmitri's words, and it is explained to me that they are in large part unemployed people. So what was up with that? Maybe someone can explain it to me as well. Okay, and then the reference to the 4 palaces. I went to the palace, or rather one of the 4 palaces in which Gustav lives. So this is a hard one, because did he mean to say, I went to the palace in which Gustav lives, but there are 4 other palaces in Copenhagen? Probably not. Probably Gustav does divide his time between 4 palaces. He was a bachelor, so he maybe didn't have an establishment of his own. He just kept apartments in these 4 different palaces. All right, and once again, they take a drive outside of Copenhagen, but this time not to see Kronborg, the Hamlet Palace, but to go to this other palace that is called a Fredensborg, and Dmitri wants to see it because it was the site of these annual big family reunions that were held in Denmark. And the Russian royal family members of the Russian royal family would come every year, and members of the British royal family, and everybody would be relaxed and enjoying themselves, and it would just be a grand occasion, but also a very relaxed one where people could be themselves. And so Dmitri refers to this happening back in Uncle Sasha's day. So I'm not sure, Uncle Sasha being Alexander III, who died when Dmitri was still just a little guy, 3 years old, I think. So he wouldn't really have remembered Uncle Sasha, but he'd heard about these gatherings. And the implication here, I guess, is that the gatherings ceased, or at least the Russian part of the family stopped going after Alexander III's death. And I don't know, I don't know enough, I guess, about the habits of Nicholas II and Alexandra, or Maria Fyodorovna, if they continued to go to these. But Dmitri is definitely looking at them as something that was before his time, that he never participated in, but obviously had heard a lot about. So he wanted to see the actual place, but he didn't find it very interesting. So naturally, I went and had a look at photographs of Fredensborg online, and yeah, I can see what he means about the barracks, because the 2 wings do have this kind of very plain barracks-like look to them, although the middle section, as he says, is quite grand. And so I'm not going to parrot him in saying that it's ugly. What's the word he uses? He found it very interesting, but surprisingly ugly. Okay, well, I wouldn't say that. But anyway, I think it's still used as a royal residence part of the year, maybe in the summer or something. And he's very surprised that at this time of the year, when it's not in use, that it's just the gardener, the groundskeeper, is in charge apparently of the whole building. At least that's the impression he gets, or it's what Gustav told him. He obviously saw the gardener, so maybe the gardener was, the one that received them and let them in. And as they were wandering around inside the building, they weren't seeing any footmen or anything like that, so it's more or less deserted. And then they go back into town, and finally we have this reference to the open car and how cold it was. So Gustav was kind enough to loan Dmitri a fur coat, but it wasn't it. You know, why on earth did they take an open car? I can imagine that that was just very unpleasant. I'm actually will be very happy to return to the house in just a few minutes, because it's cold here in November in the Portland area, but it is probably not as cold as it is in Copenhagen in February, as a general rule. And he uses this expression that I hadn't come across before, saying, the next day I felt like the last dog. And a lot of times if I look up idioms and expressions online in our day and age, you can find them. You don't have to search high and low, but this one I wasn't able to find. So if any of you are native Russian speakers and you've heard this one, let me know. In English, I guess we would say, the next day I felt like a dog, you know. Well, we probably wouldn't say that. Okay, yeah. So he'll be a little under the weather in the next diary entry, but as I say, the next few days are really going to be a social whirl, so come back for that if you can. Wow, my collar's really askew here. And I'll see you then. Bye.